I came back from a short business trip, tossed my bag down in the kitchen, and thought I'd walk out to the field to check on the corn before dinner. Only, when I opened the back door, I froze. Right there in the middle of 12 acres that had been in my family for 4 generations, sat a freshly poured concrete pad with rebar sticking out and orange cones all around it. A launch pad for drones. In my cornfield. No permission, no notice, just there. At first I thought maybe I was imagining it, but the smell of wet cement and the tire tracks cutting through rows that had taken me months to cultivate told me otherwise. My heart was pounding. This wasn't just about crops, it was about legacy. My dad bought this land in the 70s with dreams of raising something steady, something lasting. And now some neighborhood committee thought it was theirs to play with. The next morning it only got worse. 3 men in shiny boots and high-end surveying gear were out there at dawn, pacing like they owned the place. I stormed straight into the rows, yanked out their bright orange development zone sign, and snapped, "This is my property. You're trespassing." They didn't even flinch, just said, "Talk to the HOA." That night the knock came. Our HOA president. Well, calling him a leader is generous. He's about as commanding as a wet napkin. Stood on my porch with a woman I'd never seen before. She introduced herself as Melissa, but from the moment she opened her mouth, I knew she was the one really running things. She had the glossy folder, the charts, the kind of smile that looks warm but never touches the eyes. "Mr. Carter," she said smoothly, "we're bringing an opportunity to the community. Jobs, tax revenue, revitalization. 73% of your neighbors already support this drone facility. We'd love your cooperation." I glanced at the folder. Professional graphics, big numbers, promises that sounded too good to be true. I asked, "Funny, I never saw that survey. Did you, Tom?" Pete, my 2 neighbors, who'd wandered over, looked as confused as I did. Melissa didn't miss a beat. She leaned in, asked casual questions about my work hours, my wife's school schedule, when we were usually home. Most people might think it was neighborly chit-chat. But after 18 years in the service, I can smell reconnaissance when it's happening. This woman was taking notes, clocking our vulnerabilities, and smiling the whole time. When she finally left, my wife leaned against the counter and said quietly, "She wasn't talking to you. She was measuring you." Tracy's got instincts sharper than mine sometimes, and that look in her eyes told me we were in trouble. The harassment started almost immediately. Survey trucks blocking Tracy's car every morning. Heavy equipment tearing up the edge of our garden. Mail tampered with. Notices about development assessments that we never requested showing up in the mailbox, already half filled out with details only someone who'd trespassed would know. And the worst? Drones flying over our property at all hours, sometimes with infrared cameras glowing in the dark. Not hobby toys. Professional surveillance. I kept telling myself maybe I was overthinking, but then Tracy brought me binocular photos of men in suits rolling into Melissa's driveway. License plates from Chicago, Columbus, not locals. Investors. They weren't building a community project. They were negotiating a business deal, and my land was the commodity. At the HOA meeting, the pressure turned ugly. Melissa stood at the front with slick slides and promises of salvation. Jobs for laid-off teachers, contracts for struggling builders, tax revenue to save the school district. My neighbors, people I'd fixed tractors with and grilled burgers beside, stared at me like I was the villain standing between them and survival. One even shouted, "You've had your pension. What about our kids' future?" And I'll be honest, that cut deep. Desperation had them turning on me, and Melissa knew exactly how to play them. The vote wasn't close. 47-3, in favor of seizing my land under emergency provisions. I remember Tracy's hand squeezing mine under the table as the room clapped like they'd just won the lottery, when in truth they'd signed a deal with the devil. I tried to fight clean. Filed FAA complaints, documented illegal drone activity, gathered evidence. But all I did was tip my hand. Suddenly, I wasn't a landowner with concerns. I was painted as an unstable veteran, paranoid, resisting progress. Social media lit up with edited clips of me frustrated at hearings, while Melissa calmly promised prosperity. My microphone conveniently cut out whenever I explained airspace regulations. And when Tracy jumped up to shout that it was rigged, they dragged her out while neighbors cheered. I've seen combat zones, but that night in our community center felt more hostile than any battlefield. And then came the day that changed everything. The grand opening. News crews, ribbon cutting, kids waving flags. Melissa strutted around like a queen showing off her kingdom. Right on cue, their shiny demonstration drone launched, climbing higher and higher for the cameras. But I knew the schedule by heart. Every Tuesday at 10:30, fighter jets from Wright Air run training passes right over that corridor. I looked south and, sure enough, contrails. The drone was climbing straight into their path. My stomach dropped, seconds from a mid-air collision that could kill pilots and rain metal across our town. I didn't think, I just ran. Shoved past security, grabbed the emergency radio, and barked in a voice I hadn't used since the service. Abort now. Phantom leader, brake right immediately. Civilian aircraft at 12 o'clock high. The F-16s veered so hard the sonic boom shattered windows. Kids cried. People ducked like bombs were dropping. But no one died. 47 feet separated that drone from millions of dollars of jets and 2 human lives. And it happened on live television. When the dust settled, the crowd's cheers had turned into stunned silence. I didn't gloat. I just said calmly, that schedule is public. Any responsible operator would have checked before launching. Cameras caught every word. Melissa stammered about how she couldn't have known, but her face told the truth. She hadn't cared to check. Within hours, the FAA grounded the entire project. Federal investigators swarmed the site, and suddenly my paranoia looked a lot more like foresight. Neighbors who'd voted against me a week before started coming up, whispering apologies. Tom muttered, "We were wrong." Pete, who'd been promised contracts to save his failing business, confessed on camera that he'd betrayed me out of desperation. It broke him to admit it, but it broke me more to hear it. Turns out Melissa wasn't just some smooth talker. She was working with a shell company tied to foreign intelligence, using small towns like ours to test military radar responses. My cornfield had been a staging ground for espionage. When the feds finally cuffed her, she cracked, screaming about failed businesses and needing money. But the evidence was overwhelming. Faked contamination reports, forged petitions with names of people who died years ago, investor deals worth millions. The woman who promised to save our town had nearly gotten us killed for profit. The community tried to heal after that. They helped restore our land, planted new crops, rebuilt fences. Tracy wrote down everything, and her records ended up helping investigators uncover similar schemes across the country. Laws were passed to stop it from happening again, and for once the system seemed to work. But here's the part that still keeps me up. A year later, I got a newspaper in the mail, no return address. Front page photo, another small town, another community drone project, and at the center of it, a woman who looked just like Melissa. Different name, same confident smile. That was the moment I realized, maybe she wasn't the mastermind at all. Maybe she was just one piece of something bigger, something still moving from town to town, looking for the next desperate community to exploit. So tell me, if your neighbors were promised jobs and salvation, but it meant losing your land, would you fight like I did, or would you give in for the so-called greater good? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I've learned one thing from all this. The line between right and wrong gets mighty blurry when survival's on the line, and I'd love to hear where you think justice really lies.